All right. Good to see everybody again. We're back in football time because I get to see you guys with a little more frequency. It's great. Really good start today. Obviously, yesterday we talked a lot about those three things and get a chance to dive hard into, cementing all three of those things, which are just such a big part of us. But really today my focus shifted to red line with the team, and that's something I talked with the team at the end of practice. Just really making that part of who we are every single day. And, our core beliefs in that red line are effort, execution, and accountability. And making sure our players understand that, this is what we believe gives us the best chance to play the high-level football we want to play. And then the way we define it for our effort is 100 miles an hour, 100% of the time. Trying to put that in language that is understandable for the players, right? And then when we talk about the execution piece, I mentioned this yesterday, but the idea that we have an opportunity to prove it every single day we step on that field, or every single day that we step into the classroom here. If you want to get an A in the class, we'll prove it by the effort and the intention you put into that work, right? It's no different on the football field. And you want to be first team, or you want to have a chance to win the Big 12, then prove it. Prove it by how we attack this meeting, this moment, this practice, this rep, and trying to just continue to break that down into our process-driven approach, to getting the outcomes that we want. And then the last thing is the accountability. And we talked about that at the end of practice also. Just, you make a mistake, own it, fix it. Like the new generation that we've been coaching here for some time, where the phrase "my bad" has become in the kind of the exit clause, like it made your mistake okay. Well, no, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, you need to own it, but now I need to see you fix it. I don't want to see you make the same mistake again. And so that's what we dove into at the end of practice, but it was a great start. I think it can be better. I'm excited to see the move we make between now and Thursday, because we got our foot on the gas pedal and we're not stopping.
Start with Justin and then Troy.
So I know only first day, but what do you think is going to be different about just the offense and just the objectives that you guys are going to do on that side of the ball under Seth?
Well, I think it's going to be fun, right? Everything you saw, everything that I mentioned yesterday, but everything you hear from Coach Daggy is always about explosive plays. And we know how impactful those can be in a football game. And that's, I think the tempo gives you some of that, the variation, the personnel variation. And I think the fact that, the guy calling it is a guy that played the position at a very high level for one of the best offensive minds of our generation, on top of the fact that also as a young coach, he's also been in the meeting room, on the board, in the fight with some other great offensive minds. I think that just gives him a great background to give us a chance to create those explosives that are so important. And I think as the players get more comfortable with the scheme, that's part of that accountability. That's part of that execution that I talked about, right? Like, you're accountable for what you know, and what you know is going to give you a better chance to execute or to prove it, right? And so I'm excited about Coach Daggy. It's going to be a lot of fun. And there's one thing I know for sure. You're going to know he's out there, which I like.
Troy and then Jenna.
Obviously talking about the new offense and early in the spring, but for Noah Fafita, a high IQ guy, this is going to be his third different offense in 3 years. How hard is that for quarterbacks, and what have you seen from him in terms of excelling at that and learning?
I think that would be challenging for some quarterbacks. I think the beauty of Noah Fafita is how intentional he is about being a great player, and that has been consistent since the first day I met him. I think you'll see what's going to take the time is the actual reps, actually doing it, right, and giving him a chance to process and make those decisions in real time. But if you watch any part of today, looks like he's got a good grasp of it for how early on in practice we are.
Jenna in the back, and then
I
Michael.
know it's early, but was there a specific group or player who kind of caught your eye today, someone who maybe stood out today?
And I know I mentioned the receivers yesterday, so my eyes were kind of on them a bunch today. I was excited about Trey Spivey. I saw him do some good stuff. And then I think the other thing I didn't mention yesterday is I'm also really excited to see this running back group. I think it's a really exciting group there. I spent obviously more time with the offense today than I did the defense. But that running back group is going to be a lot of fun to watch. There's a good mix of youth and experience in there with some high-level players that are returning and that we've inserted into that mix. And so I think it's going to be fun to watch those two groups. So give me another day and I'll have a little more specific of exactly who, lit up practice.
Michael and Jason.
You mentioned tempo earlier. It was pretty evident when you watched the offense. Even when you guys were in 7-on-7, the defensive guys like sprinting on and off the field. Is that just like an overall kind of theme that you're emphasizing?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's really what I'm challenging the team with. What I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this is that red line. You know, are we 100, 100? Are we 100 miles an hour 100% of the time? I just feel like playing with great effort all the time in all three phases can offset some things in a game, right? Can offset a turnover or a mistake, or can offset a talent differential, whatever it is. I just like, so we are trying to elevate that part of our football team. So that's why you see such urgency. That was the only crossover period we had today. Just because we're trying to keep people safe because we're not in full gear yet. But I love the intensity of that. I was excited because I'm like, okay, we're gonna be getting more of that as spring practice goes on.
We'll go Jason and then Aaron in the back.
Not necessarily like specific install, but when you're changing an offense, what does the process look like for these guys to learn it and get comfortable with it and all that?
Well, it starts with, you know, giving them opportunities to be in the meeting room and start to see, okay, this is what it looks like when you draw it, you know, kind of like whole teaching it of it. But, you know, this is what it looks like when we draw it, right? Here's a drawn picture of it, right? Here's a video picture of it. And then you get out and practice and you have a walkthrough of it, right? And then you run a piece of it. And then you put the whole thing together and run it as a group. And then you run it against the defense or vice versa against the offense, right? So it's like trying to break it down into small pieces so that we can accelerate the learning curve and then put those pieces together in a progression that gives us a chance to execute with consistency.
Aaron and then Justin.
In this time when you guys are kind of transitioning, getting back into the groove, out of the returning players like Noah, is there anything that they've said or done that's kind of surprised you maybe?
I don't know that it's surprised me. I just see Noah like taking a more assertive leadership role with this team, which I think is exciting. I think that's something that it's such a natural position for your quarterback to be in. He's the one that always gets, you know, so much of the love or so much of the blame, depending on how it goes. And I think that's one of those things where, you know, Noah is really finding his voice with our football team in a much more assertive way. And so I don't think it's necessarily a surprise. It's something I'm excited about.
Justin, and then we'll go Cohen.
And of course, you would like to have a player like T-Mac on your team, but do you find any benefits or positives to having Noah not maybe rely on T-Mac so much?
I don't know that I really think of it that way, because if I had a choice, I'd choose to have him on our team. So there's like a bunch of NFL teams in the next like month are going to make that same decision, but I don't think so. I think that, you know, I mentioned yesterday with the receiver group, I do think there are a lot of players in that room that can make plays, and I think we've added some guys that have some real speed, which I think we were missing a year ago at that position, and I think we've answered that with how aggressively we attacked the portal in the offseason. So I think it's going to be a little bit more by committee. Of course, a few guys are going to emerge as big-time playmakers, right? But right now, one day in, who that's going to be, we're looking at a core group, and we're excited to see what they can do.
Cohen.
So you mentioned with like roster construction that it's a lot like speed dating in a sense. You've had a lot of changes with the coaching staff as well. With all these changes with the roster and the team, how do you ensure that there's a team? You know, they come together and they'll work together. How do you ensure that, and where's that process like right now, you think?
That is a great question. And I think that's probably the challenge of college football right now for everybody, not specific to the University of Arizona, considering just like the turnover, it's so many places. You know, for us, it's always going to start with us trying to build a deeper connection with the players, trying to get them to know each other on something more than the surface level. I think that's really, really important. I think, and there's a process to that because some of the guys are still getting comfortable with each other. But how many situations can we put them in that aren't football related, where they're either just having fun together or they're maybe talking about some real stuff together, so that it gives them a chance to get to know each other, you know, deeper than just what's on the surface, and build that real connection, that real bond that is so special in football.
Michael.
It's really easy to forget that these guys are still students these days because there's so much talk about NIL and revenue sharing and all that jazz. But I guess there's a couple guys who maybe have some class conflicts that'll cause them to maybe miss a part of practice or whatever. How do you approach that with them?
I've never told a player what classes to take or what major to be in. not one time in my career, because I think that's a very, very critical part of his life journey, and I'm not going to interfere with that process. And if he has to miss football because of it, we'll catch him up. We'll find a way to make that work. I've always been in that space. The beauty of it is with our Cats, department here, we have such incredible academic support. We have the highest team GPA we've ever had at the University of Arizona for the football team. I'm so proud of how our players attack academics. I'm so appreciative of the support that we have in that space. I'm coming from my last place where we didn't have anything like that. And there's such a high level of accountability for our players in their academic space. And then that's followed up with support from the coaching staff. And because that's why they're here, is to go to school. And I understand all that other stuff that you mentioned. And that's the fun part, But the stuff that no one can ever take away from you is what they're going to get done getting a degree from the University of Arizona.
Jordan and Brent.
Noah gets a lot of recognition as a leader, and deservedly so, but who are some of those other returners you've really seen step up this offseason as leaders?
Rhino, holy smokes. And he's still kind of coming back from his injury, but what an incredible voice. I think if you ask our strength and conditioning staff, they would say he was the MVP of the offseason, that first 7 weeks. I mean, he was really, really embracing that role. He already has natural energy. He already has great charisma, and just leaning into that, and the players absolutely leaned into it. I saw some good leadership from Chris Hunter during practice today, which I was really encouraged and excited about. And then on the defensive side of the ball, there's some natural leadership, obviously from Dalton and Stukes. That shows up with some real frequency. Genesis, you hear their voices a lot. Trey Smith also does a really nice job. So I'm excited. I know there's a big group of new players here in the program, but the returning players have done an incredible job of bringing them into the family, explaining to them, and making them feel what Bear Down Brotherhood is all about. And because of that, these new players are accepting the leadership from the guys I just mentioned.
Troy and Justin.
Obviously, no Fafita, there is no question mark who your guys' quarterback is going to be, but you brought in a lot more bodies than last year you had on the roster. How important is that for the team to have those guys behind them, and also just in terms of level of competition behind Noah?
That's a great question, and I got asked a little bit of a similar question yesterday, and I think the exciting thing, in regards to Braden, is that he's a guy that started a bunch of games in a Power 4 conference a year ago. So he has real football experience. And at that position, there's nothing more important than experience. But for not just the quarterback position, for every position, you're always trying to increase competition at the position, always, because that elevates the entire room. You want them to have to operate under real pressure in the practice environment so that when they get to the game day, they can just cut it loose and play. So you want them used to feeling that day in and day out. And the way you do that is by recruiting good players at every position so that there's real natural competition. Does that make sense?
Justin and then Jason.
You guys have had a lot of guest speakers and visitors here. What can you say just about getting guys like Lance Briggs to come back, and also some of the non-football people that are coming in and inspiring your players?
Yeah, I think anytime we can get a football alum who's done an incredible job professionally, and I'm not even talking about NFL, I'm talking about just building an adult life, to get in front of our players and educate them on what opportunities are available to them in the big world. I think we're incredibly fortunate with Tobruk Blaine and the Beyond Football program, and the programming she consistently provides our players, the mentorship she provides them in their life beyond football, whether that's Genesis starting his nonprofit, right, or internships that several of our players are involved in, or going to be involved in, through the rest of summer. I tell every player that I recruit and every player that plays for us, I want them to chase their NFL dream with everything they have, absolute everything they have. But I also want them to build this plan B at the same time, because with them, football is such an interesting game. If you're lucky and you play for 6 years, you're 3 times the average career length of an NFL football player, right? So say you're lucky and you play 6-8 years. Okay, so now you're 28, 30 years old. What are you going to do for the next 50 years of your life? How are you going to find fulfillment? How are you going to contribute to society? How are you going to raise a family? So that's really that's a core part of our program, is beyond football. And so those speakers are all super impactful, whether they come from, because we're not just educating them on job stuff, right? There's also a financial literacy component, right? So we're like the players that do have some wherewithal because of the way of college football is now. We want to make sure that they're being smart with that and understanding how to take advantage of what the opportunity they've been given in regards to playing college football right now. So that's a huge part of us, and it's a really important part.
Jason, and our last question, Michael.
What's the plan for center throughout camp? We saw a few guys take reps there today, and just how are you approaching that position?
With a few guys taking reps today. Yeah, no, we obviously Grayson's played a little bit for us there, and so that gives us a shot. But I think we're going to be fine there. It's going to be ongoing development. I think as we add the new players, and as we go through spring, and obviously we're going to add some new players in the offensive line in late May. Like that, there's going to be that thing will solidify as we go, right? That's a huge important position. But I think you're going to see some guys. Coach Oglesby try some guys at some different spots that we think, might have a chance to be a great player there. And obviously it's a huge piece of it just because we had such a solid, good football player there for the last few years in Bake, right?
Last question, Michael.
You alluded to this a little bit yesterday about having a full-time special teams coach as opposed to it sort of being a side gig for someone who maybe doesn't really even want to do it. But when we also saw Coach Nybar, if I'm saying that right,
Yep.
doing some interesting looking drills out there. He seems like he's got a really big personality. What do you think he's going to bring to the organization?
I think we're all excited about Coach Nybar. He has incredible energy. His meetings are just having had that experience of having that job. It's a challenging job because you're dealing with the whole team. You're the only coach on the staff besides the head coach that talks to the whole team. And he just has incredible command of what he is teaching and total confidence and belief in what he's teaching. And he's a fantastic teacher, right? Everything is very clear. Everything is very well explained. There's, everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to be and the details of their assignment, and the energy and that consistent intention and clarity that he brings to coaching all that stuff, because it is complicated. Those are the only plays in the game where you're either attacking or defending the entire football field, width and length. You know what I mean? Like, you can say that on offense and defense, but it doesn't work out that way. There's so much space in those games or in those plays and games. So I'm excited about Coach Nybar. Our players are. First meeting with him, they're like, okay, here we go. It was a lot of fun.
All right, that's our time.
All right, thank you all. Bear down.